The Road to Autonomy is presented by the Road to Autonomy Index. The Road to Autonomy Index is a rules-based equity benchmark index that measures the performance of a basket of global companies that are involved in the development and commercialization of autonomy. Institutional investors and fund managers are watching megatrends that are shaping investment opportunities today. These megatrends are creating thematic investment ideas and opportunities for forward-thinking investors. We believe that one of the biggest megatrends today is autonomy. That's why we created the Road to Autonomy Index, the world's first and only pure-play index to track the thematic investment opportunity in autonomy. Follow the Road to Autonomy Index on your favorite finance app by simply typing in the ticker Autonomy. To learn more about the Road to Autonomy Index, visit roadtoautonomy.com/index. Hello and welcome to the Road to Autonomy. I'm your host, Grayson Brulte. On today's episode, we're absolutely honored to welcome Olivia Hu, head of autonomous trucking, Uber Freight. Olivia, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Grayson, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
It's exciting to have you here because we're coming up to Christmas, and Uber Freight, you're going to become Santa Claus for the freight industry because you're enabling autonomous trucks to scale while generating revenue because you're getting them loads. And it's a really wonderful thing. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of Uber Freight and how you're acting as Santa Claus, Olivia, in your opinion, what is the current state of the autonomous trucking industry?
Well, first of all, I can't believe it's already Christmas holiday season that's creeping up on us. Where did 2023 go? But I will say that looking back at this year and everything that has happened, from the markets to the volatility of rates to even just the autonomous trucking industry specifically, so much has happened, which makes it very exciting. There's never a dull moment in autonomous trucking, in my opinion, or the autonomous space in general. For example, I live in San Francisco, and I step outside, I can see the Waymo and Cruise cars that are driverless on the roads, and here in San Francisco. And it's no longer just a science experiment, an R&D project. It's really exciting because this technology is here. We're kind of at this inflection point where, everything we thought was science fiction is now happening. And we're seeing different commercial applications, one of them being in the robotaxi market, one of them being in trucking and freight. And as it's starting to hit the market, we are piloting, we're working with customers, we're looking at what adoption looks like from a shipper perspective, a carrier perspective, and then engagement with just the public, people who have questions about this, and regulators as well. So I think the autonomous trucking industry right now is just at this very exciting moment when it's going from purely a technology, an R&D pilot or project, to let's look at go-to-market. What is the long-term strategy? How do we bring different ecosystem players from OEMs, tier ones, autonomous trucking developers, maintenance providers, fleets, shippers, networks like ourselves, all together to start planning that long-term commercialization strategy?
Yeah, we have to plan long-term. You mentioned the markets with the rate environment. Bill Ackman of Pershing Square Capital, he's very vocal saying the Fed's going to cut in Q1. You have Goldman out saying look for a potential cut in Q2, Q3 next year. And if that's going to happen, it's going to accelerate the development of autonomous trucks. You're seeing the IPO market starting to crack open with Reddit confidentially filing there. So perhaps we could see the acceleration. And then a lot of companies are very public where they're saying Q4 24 into 25, we're going to start to see driver out commercial operations. From where your vantage point is, you have a great economist in Mazen and you're sitting on a lot of data. So you've got a lot of insights. Do you see these first commercializations being in the Texas Triangle from the Dallas-Fort Worth to Houston to El Paso? And then if so, where do you eventually see that expanding from potentially?
Yeah, so today our commercial pilots run exactly as you had described, Grayson, from Dallas-Fort Worth to Houston and back, and then also Dallas-Fort Worth to El Paso. And they're two very different lanes. One of them is about 250 miles, short enough for a round trip for a regular manual driver today. And the other one is about 600 miles, so much longer, and you can't do a round trip in one day given hours of service limitations. So you start to see the benefits of what autonomous trucking looks like when hours of service no longer applies, because there is no driver inside the vehicle. And so I think that from our perspective, these lanes are very valuable in learning about how much demand is there for this kind of application? What is the right application? Is it longer haul versus shorter haul? Is it this transfer hub where the driver drives it to a terminal, drops off the trailer, and then the autonomous truck takes it down the rest of that freight corridor to another transfer hub outside of the city and drops it off before another manual driver comes to pick it up? So is that a better application, kind of like intermodal, or is it better to do end-to-end? And we're learning different lessons when it comes to operational efficiencies, when it comes to improvement in emissions, improvements in driving, transit time, et cetera, SLAs. How do we make sure that we constantly enable the right SLAs and service for our customers to not disrupt their networks in each of the different modes and operating models that we apply to autonomous trucks? And so we're learning a lot. And that's why, when we talk about this long-term strategy that I had mentioned, everything we're doing now, all of these pilots with shippers, with fleets, with maintenance, with even just the transfer hub providers, all of that is going to feed into what this is going to look like in the long run. So we're excited to be gaining a lot of that data today so that we can build for the future of tomorrow.
As you build for the future, at some point, DFW, Houston, El Paso routes are going to become saturated. We're going to have a race to the bottom. And the economics aren't going to work at some point on those just because of everybody's being there. When do you see new lanes coming online? Is it from a regulatory standpoint? Is it a technical standpoint? Or is it from your side? Is it from your customer demand saying, hey, we have a shortage here. Can you backfill this with autonomy? Is that what's going to eventually drive those other lanes?
All of the above. Maybe that's a cop-out answer, but definitely it's a multi-dimensional equation that we are calculating to optimize for which lanes are going to come online. Today, for example, when we are looking and advising some of our partners, we look at our entire network and we want to share data with them on which lanes make the most sense for autonomous. And today what we look at are, for example, what type of freight you can haul, whether it's a dry van or refrigerated or intermodal, what length of haul makes the most sense, what region can you haul in, what weather conditions, weight limitations. And then we pair that from the AV side with our customer demand. We then look at their network and how much demand makes sense, because it's not just a which lanes do I open up, but when do I open them up? It's a prioritization equation as well. And so when we look at the different ODD parameters, we then also look at customer demand. And then obviously we work very closely with our policy teams and regulatory bodies to make sure we're always compliant, but also to make sure that social adoption is ready. How is the public engaging? What is their reaction? How do we increase awareness and education? And that includes for shippers and carriers alike. Not every shipper or every carrier is going to say, yes, I want autonomous trucks on my network. Actually, many of them have questions around safety, insurance, liability. All of these questions still remain open. And how do we increase awareness of and raise levels of education around what is the benefit of doing this? Why is it safer on the roads? How does it see further? What does this technology actually do? How does it respond in this kind of situation versus this kind of situation? And I think it's a kind of amalgamation of all of the above, of like demand, the right application, the right kind of environment for it from a regulation perspective, but also working very closely with the local municipalities, the people, the law enforcement, et cetera.
Law enforcement play a critical role in this, and you've alluded to this several times, the general public. And I have two theories on how do we build trust with the general public for the autonomous trucking industry. One, the autonomous truck developers, and you know where I'm going, guys, you got to learn to play the honk game. So when the truck's going down there and there's a kid in the back of the vehicle, the truck has to be able to play the honk game. And that goes back to what Ruth Handler did with Barbie, a big movie over the summer, where Ruth Handler, she advertised on the Mickey Mouse Clubhouse and she marketed directly to children. That was a big innovation and breakthrough that she had with Barbie, the loud Barbie, eventually to have the big success that it has with Mattel today. And then the other thing is, let's all get together to a grocery store day. When the autonomous trucking industry comes together, let's just say, Uber Freight, you're the platform. Everybody gets together and we demonstrate the true economic value of this. Everything in that grocery store is 25% off the day because brought to you by an autonomous truck. Think about the inbound public trust and demand that would happen if we did that. It'd be mind-blowing. Well, those are big ideas. What are you doing today to build the trust with the public?
I think there are a number of things. So it's very different, for example, from a ride-hailing perspective when, Uber rides is hauling people versus what we're doing hauling cargo and freight. One of the key things is from a passenger perspective, when you get in a vehicle, you want to feel safe. And so they need to know what is happening. So you need the visualizations, for example. You need the engagement with a human. Here, it's slightly different. It's almost like a train without needing to build tracks. You're hauling this freight and it's more flexible because it's on the highway, it's on the freeway, and we don't need to necessarily go and educate people and make sure they're up to date and informed every step of the process when they're inside the vehicle because there are no people inside the vehicle. I think what's more important is when people see this on the road, they will have questions. So how do we give them a forum? How do we give them, for example, a hotline to call and ask questions? How do we give them a place to voice concerns if they see anything? And so that's really important for us, I think, is one aspect. It's giving them that forum. But then also, working closely with truck drivers. Truck drivers are very worried that this is going to displace their jobs. And at Uber Freight, we have about 2 million drivers on our network today. And our goal is to democratize access to this technology. It is not about replacing them, but empowering them. And that's what we've always done, right? Like when we first built the Uber Freight app, it's to empower our truck drivers, carriers to be able to go in and book loads 24/7, have full visibility and transparency around pricing, around the details of the load upfront. The magic that Uber brings that you expect, we want to bring that to trucking and the modernization using technology. And that's essentially what we're doing is we are working with various fleets of all sizes. You could be a large fleet and be talking to the AV technology developers, but you could also be a mid-sized fleet that's interested in this, but you don't have the same sway or you don't have the same leverage to go directly to these autonomous trucking developers. Well, we want to work with you there. We want to be able to bring this technology to you and see what is the best application for your business. Do you actually benefit from having 1 or 2 autonomous trucks in your fleet? Or maybe you should be hauling the local hauls in a transfer hub model. Maybe you should be doing the drayage runs from the autonomous terminal to the end facility. And we are doing that already today. We are working with a couple of the smaller fleets on running in the Dallas metropolitan area, in the Houston metropolitan area, and in El Paso, those drayage hauls. And we're getting really good feedback. What we're hearing is, for example, it's more predictable because the autonomous trucks essentially kind of run on a schedule similar to rail. They take off at a certain time, they land at a certain time. And so you have a more predictable schedule for those manual drivers on either end. So they really like that. And they know what time they're done. They have a certain volume that they know they will hit that day. So it's actually, we're seeing a lot of interest in these kind of early champions of autonomous driving who are at the forefront, who actually get to experience this, see what a transfer hub terminal looks like and what that handoff between trailers looks like. So I think we have a very important role in engaging the public, but more specifically also the trucker base for them to see what does this actually mean for them? How does work change? It's more local, so they get to go home, but also does that change the type of work they do, the predictability in their schedules, et cetera.
You're creating value for the trucking community. That's how I would describe it. You're creating trucking. They can go home at the end of the night and have dinner with their family. They can go to church on Sunday, or they can go to a Little League game. You're creating a lot of value there. You're right. Autonomous trucking, in my opinion, is a digital railroad. You know when it departs, where it is, and when it's going to arrive, and it's highly dependable. Are you seeing inbound from these local small fleets? Hey, Olivia, we're interested in autonomous trucking, but we don't have $100 million to dedicate to this technology. But however, we have a fleet of 30 trucks that we can go, 100 miles, 30 miles for those last miles. Are you seeing that? I want to call it curiosity inbound or is it mostly just coming from the larger fleets?
I don't know if any fleet has $100 million to dedicate to autonomous trucking, but I will say that it's less inbound. It's more when they do come to Uber Freight, they're looking to fill their schedules. And so it could be autonomous, it could be non-autonomous. But when we have selected specifically carriers that we've seen good service metrics with, we have something called a carrier scorecard where they've ranked really high on the scorecard. They're dependable, reliable, efficient. When we bring them into the fold, they have historically really liked hauling autonomous and have preferred, but they don't come in having that knowledge in advance just because autonomous is still so new. And I would say the majority of carriers don't know much about it. I will say most of the engagement with regards to running pilots has been large fleets that engage directly with the autonomous trucking providers. But for the smaller fleets, they come to Uber Freight just looking for freight. But when we do give them autonomous with a handful of the smaller fleets, they're very excited by it. They're learning what it is. And we've never seen anything like, oh, I won't take this freight because, this is a autonomous load that I'm hauling. But what we have seen is like curiosity, questions early on. And then once they get the hang of it, because you're going to the same facility or the same transfer hub terminal each time, they get to ask questions. They get to engage. They get to see what's happening. And some of them are very excited about being able to shape the future, being able to have their voices incorporated and tell them like, hey, this is what I do for the tandem. This is what we're seeing with this trailer issue. Can we make sure it doesn't happen again next time, et cetera? So they're excited to be able to kind of shape the future alongside us.
I'm going to give you a Walt Disney analogy. Put a little pixie dust on it.
Exactly. You were just there,
yes,
weren't you?
I was. Is that helping to build the trust as you put the pixie dust there, where they're going at their dinner table, they're in their local community talking about the positive benefits of this technology is having on their bottom line and it's having on their business, and then it becomes an inspiration or a growth leader for building that trust?
I think it definitely, for me, what's most important about building trust is just being very transparent and honest and giving them the time to answer questions and ask questions. The whole trust building that we are doing today, we work very closely with the fleets that we work with the shippers that we work with as well, and the autonomous technology developers. We try to be open, transparent, data-driven, and we're not trying to impose anything on others. We're not saying you have to take this autonomous load. No, only if you're comfortable, if you're interested, if this makes sense for your business, your schedule, your drivers. And same with shippers. We always get our customers' approval before we run anything on an autonomous load. And we believe in full transparency. Maybe shippers, some have argued shippers don't care. As long as you get it there on time at the right price, they don't really care. But we don't think so. We think that we want to be open with them. We want to make sure they know what's happening, and they get very excited. And we share additional data, in addition to the usual metrics of just this is when we arrived, on-time pick, on-time drop. We also share data around what percentage of this was autonomous. If we can show you a video of your freight being hauled autonomously, we will. We tell them, for example, what happens, what's the transit time, what happens at the transit yard, what does that handoff process look like? What are we working towards to make this better? And we want to incorporate our customers' voices too, so then they get to ask us questions. For example, what do they need to change at their facility to accommodate autonomous trucks in the future? Does this mean a 24/7 operation? Does this mean a specific parking area or enter and exit lane for autonomous trucks? So we work very closely with them as well as they're thinking and planning for the future infrastructure that's required for AV trucks.
It's really smart. I could say you learned a lot from your pass car side of the business. If you look at all the stuff that Uber had to go through with airports and drop off and pickup zones, it's very similar because you're right. The infrastructure is going to have to be updated or modified or frankly redesigned to really say fully optimized for autonomous trucks. So you're helping that data. You're informing the Prologis of the world, the Hillwoods of how to develop it as they really start to scale us. From a partnership perspective, how's Uber Freight approaching and evaluating potential partnerships with the autonomous trucking industry? Obviously, everybody in the industry knows who you are. So how are you going through an evaluation process? Is this going through a committee or what does that evaluation process look like?
So today, I think we are very kind of stringent on what we expect to see from a technology developer before we agree to engage with them. So a couple of areas. First and foremost, most importantly, is safety. What is your safety framework? Present to us your safety case and what you're doing as an org. So that means org-wide, what are the policies around safety? If someone spots an issue, can I raise my hand? And we discuss this before we continue to move. So there's safety from an org perspective. There's safety from the vehicle perspective. For the vehicle, what do you need to do before you actually launch this on a public road? Simulation-wise, test tracks, et cetera. What else are we doing to make sure that the vehicle itself is safe enough to be on the road? And then last but not least is operational safety. From an operations perspective, what kind of safeguards do we have in place, things to mitigate risk, et cetera. So I think safety is first and foremost the most important thing we look at, and we never want to jeopardize our customers' freight or anyone on the road. And so safety is the first thing that we evaluate our partners on. The second area is technical capability. You will have no product if you can't solve this very difficult technical problem of computer vision and then its interaction with the hardware and the dialogue between the software and the hardware. And so who is your leadership team? That's very important. What's their history? What have they built in the past? And then overall, your engineering team, what is their technical capability? Their expertise, where they come from, and all that. And I think that's very important in building, at the end of the day, a very technical product that involves both software and hardware. And then last but not least is the go-to-market strategy, what I was saying earlier. I think having a real comprehensive go-to-market strategy that involves an OEM, that involves your end customer is critical. I think it's easy to build the project. You can have a brilliant engineering team that has a really strong product. But if you are not engaging with an OEM, you have no long-term strategy. How are you going to scale and manufacture this without an OEM? And similarly, if you don't bring in your end customers, if it's the fleet, if you're a DaaS model, or if it's a shipper, if you're doing the TaaS model, then you're not really building something for your end customer. You're just building something for the fun of it. So we think having the right go-to-market strategy will be really critical, and that includes working with other ecosystem players like OEMs, like ourselves, network providers, shippers, and fleets.
I'm going to say something, and I'm going to go down Jerome Powell world with you here. You've got a KYC policy and know your customer. You're not taking any chances. You're saying, okay, there's the Patriot Act. This is banking. There's all these regulations that you have to go through in order to open a checking account or a savings account at say, JP Morgan, for example. And so in order to work with Uber Freight, you have your own version of the KYC. You have the safety check, the technology check, and the go-to-market strategy. How is that developed? It's very similar to what banks do, and it works very healthy for banks to stop money laundering. But how is your version, Uber Freight's version of the KYC developed?
Yeah, great question. So I would say, if we had federal regulations like the airline industry, if we had FAA guidelines and standards that every, airplane and airline had to meet, it would make our lives so much easier. But unfortunately, that doesn't exist today. We're still nascent enough where regulation is not as standardized as we would like it to be. Every state has a different regulatory body that governs and has different requirements. And so we had to kind of step in and learn from what we know. And as you know, at Uber, we have built self-driving in the past with Uber ATG. And we really understand what it takes to build this technology. And I think that's one of the biggest differentiators here, right? Because we understand how to build self-driving computer vision, motion planning, data annotations, et cetera. We know what that full tech stack is required, and therefore we also know what it means to be safe. We had a very strong safety team on ATG as well, and they are all stars, from FMCSA, DOT, et cetera. And they know what it means to also deploy vehicles on the road and what's required there. And so I think the marriage of those two, having experts from the industry, as well as having firsthand experience in building this technology ourselves, puts us in a really good position to evaluate what does it take to actually build a safe product, and also what is the criteria for doing so. I think we are unique in that sense, and having understood that. And then at the same time, the lack of regulation puts us in a space where we couldn't have to build this ourselves, but we want to work with policymakers to build the right framework and guidelines with them as the industry matures.
I mean, the ATG team, I got to give a shout out to Nat Buse on the team. And Nat did a lot of really, really good comprehensive work for ATG prior to the acquisition by Aurora. What you describe with Uber Freight's KYC, know your customer, is something that you can stand behind. So if it's from an insurance or from a regulator, from a policymaker, you have a framework that you could stand behind. It's something that I think, frankly, I'm not your publicist or PR person, but you should highlight more because it's something, in my opinion, that you should be proud with. Because here it is. We go through this deep due diligence, and you've had 3 partners that have passed your KYC with Aurora, Waabi, and Waymo Via prior to the shutdown. Is the goal to partner with every autonomous developer, add Stack, add Kodiak on there, so at the end of the day, you've got everybody, and then they've all passed the Uber Freight KYC? And if you don't partner with them, that means they can't pass the KYC?
We're like the driver's license for the industry. Call us a CMV. I would say we are, we won't partner with everyone, especially if they do not, like you said, pass our requirements around safety, around technical capabilities, around long-term go-to-market strategy, then it doesn't make sense for us to partner with them. We have a very small but lean team here, and we just don't have the bandwidth to partner with everyone. We only partner if it makes sense, if we truly believe that they have a safe, reliable product with a long-term strategy that is the right commercial application for our customers. And so, if that means that all the players left today meet that bar, then great, then we'll partner with them. But I'll say there's a little bit of survivorship bias, like all the ones that are here today, that we are talking about may have passed that bar, and there's a reason why they're here today as a result. And we just don't talk about the ones that are, no longer around and that we chose not to partner with. But I think our goals is really to keep our framework rigid. And if you pass the framework, then we want to make sure we are a neutral player, because at the end of the day, we're just looking out for our shippers' interests and what is their transportation needs. How do we provide them with the right solution for their needs, and less so about kind of handpicking which player to partner with, but more so to just be a neutral player, finding the best solution for our customers.
Neutral player goes back into the Uber roots as a platform, and you let anybody connect, and that's where that neutrality comes in. So you had the partnership with Waymo Via. Waymo publicly announced they shut it down. You had a 10-year multi-phase partnership. Waymo Via has not shut down. They're actually still dedicating engineering resources to the trucking program. Not well reported, but it is very much alive inside of Waymo. When that becomes public again and they announce it, will we see them back on the Uber Freight platform, or they're going to have to go through your KYC process all over again?
We don't lower our bar for anyone, even if you're Waymo. We will go through the same process and run the whole evaluation. But having seen Waymo the first time around, I'm sure they'll meet the bar and emphasis on safety. And I think Waymo is doing a great job today on ride hailing. For anyone who is in San Francisco and wants to go on a ride hailing, a driverless ride, hit me up. It is truly phenomenal, and I'm excited to see how it will make these roads safer, starting with San Francisco and then the rest of the country.
And then they can hail it through Uber. The Waymo Via, it's available in Uber and select markets. That goes back to, as I said earlier, your roots of being a platform. For the truck side, why start with Aurora and Waabi? Aurora makes sense because Uber, through one of your holding companies, is the largest investor in Aurora. Waabi, you're also an investor. Is that because Uber's investors in them, or is there something in the technology, or was it the teams, the leadership, the engineering? What started that?
Yeah, it's kind of like the chicken or the egg problem. The reason why we're invested in it is a number of factors. They have a really strong leadership team, really strong technical capabilities. I would say I've been in the truck a couple times, and phenomenal product. Just handles everything from, stop signs, unprotected left turns, to lane merges, etc., very smoothly, really well done product. And most importantly, as mentioned before, their high emphasis on safety. Nat Buse is at Aurora now and leading their safety team. And I think that we're very bullish and optimistic about Aurora for all of these reasons, hence invested, and hence why we partnered, hence why we're running pilots today and doing many more things on the integration side, on the piloting side, and beyond. Similarly, with Waabi, they are newer to the space, but also super strong rockstar team. And more importantly, they get to leverage some of the latest AI research and incorporate that into their technology, which is a huge advantage because AI is so fast moving. It has changed so much from the, DARPA Grand Challenge back in 2004 till now, 20 years later. They can leverage all of the latest AI research and incorporate that into the technology, which helps them leapfrog a lot of, what has been done in the past that we had to learn. And I think that gives them a huge advantage. And given, Raquel, her leadership, and the rest of the team, they've hired rock stars throughout. So we're very optimistic about both.
Yeah, I got two friends on the team. You got Dustin Cole and Sam Lesh, and they bring complementing skills, but it accelerates. They have a strong bench of talent at Waabi. It'd be interesting to see if Waabi World, their simulation platform, allows them to accelerate, or if the other individuals, companies in the industry using the Applied Intuition platform. It's going to be really interesting to see what that simulation platform gives Waabi in terms of a advantage. So I'm an economics guy, and I'm really curious. This is a hypothetical because it might not happen, but it could happen. So I'm not going to say either way. But in a hypothetical world, Uber Freight has a partnership with every autonomous trucking company out there. How do you determine what loads go to what AV company? Is the carrier going to pick it? How's that? I mean, because you're neutral, so you got to maintain the neutrality. Is it going to come down to pricing, or how's that going to work?
Like I said before, we are a neutral marketplace. We do not pick players based on anything besides specifically the right solution for our customer. And I think every customer is different. Similarly, if you look at our partnerships with each of these autonomous trucking developers, they're all different as well. Today, none of these players have been commoditized yet, right? Like some can do, for example, end-to-end, some do the transfer hub model. Some prefer to do more, let's say, for example, refrigerated and have a weight limitation that's different from another one. Some of them can only do dry van and they have a higher weight limitation, et cetera. So I would say every player is different and unique in its own way. And so we are going to put those parameters together and present each of these solutions independently, to our customers and evaluate their network and see what is the best application based on the differences that each player provides. So it's hard to say in the future, will they all look the same? If they all look the same, then, it's the same way that we pick carriers today. We run through the same procurement processes. We run through service metrics, pricing, capacity, et cetera, and see what is the best offering that they can provide to our customers. But the reality is today, it's not a commoditized market at all, and the technical capabilities for each player can be different, and the requirements for each player can be different. And so it's just a matter of what is the right fit between, and that's our whole role, is to broker between the shipper's needs and what the AV fleets can provide.
Because right now, as you know, and we both know, and the industry knows, we're all focused on the Dallas Triangle, the DFW Triangle. Me, if I'm a CEO of an autonomous trucking company, I'm focused on the Southeast, primarily for one fact, the expansion of the Port of Savannah. It is expanding at rapid numbers, and I don't have a lot of competition there. So I'm going to go where I can get a larger pricing power. And so we look at pricing power. In order to get that from your standpoint, you need data to get the really good insights. Uber Freight recently announced the Insights AI. Really well done on that. That was really neat to see that what Lior announced there. When will Insights AI be integrated into Uber Freight's autonomous trucking platform, and what are the benefits going to be to your customers when that happens?
Yeah, I am so excited about Insights AI, and it's not because I think these AI tools are, all the hype right now. But when I was at Deliver and we talked to our largest customers, hundreds of customers there, when they saw the demo with Insights AI, one of the top questions I got was, when do I get that? When can I get a hold of that? Can I be one of your early pilot customers? I think people are very excited to see a tool that they can interact with and ask questions and get really good answers that they can act on. So it's actually a way to structure information and data that they have in a digestible way so that they can actually use that information and make decisions and find bottlenecks, cut costs. How do I improve service? What do I need to do? And where are those issues that I need to resolve? And so from my perspective, I think Insights AI and our ability to kind of power logistics intelligently using AI, because we are a tech and digital first company, I think we can empower people and our customers' transportation teams like never before. They don't have to go through multiple Excel spreadsheets. They don't have to go through different Tableau dashboards anymore. And then its application to autonomous trucking, Insights AI will work for autonomous and non-autonomous. But I think what makes it really exciting for autonomous is kind of this overlying like end-to-end product where we're leveraging digital technology to improve and lower operational costs, improve efficiencies, et cetera. We are focused on modernizing logistics and supply chain. And I think that really differentiates Uber Freight. Like, sure, we have an $18 billion freight under management network with, thousands of shippers that you can tap into. We also have 2 million truck drivers that you can tap into as well. But many other players out there have freight to move or carriers that they can tap into. But what really differentiates us is we have the ability to build technology and automation and products to lower those costs and create more automation for you. And so I think that Insights AI is just an example of this, and it will apply to both autonomous trucking, but also the rest of the business, even before autonomous trucking, becomes a major part of the network in any way, which will take many, many years.
It will take many years, but at some point, I'm not going to put a timeline on this, it will become a very large part of your network. When it becomes that large point, some point in the future, do you see that majority of that being focused on the long haul routes, let's say 300 miles, 500 miles, 600 miles? You see where that, and then you use the professional men and women that are really great professional drivers using those the last mile until we eventually go hub to hub?
I think long haul mile makes a lot of sense. Long haul, because without hours of service, our customers will get faster delivery. What may take 2 days to get delivered in the past now gets shortened to 1 day, for example. And so I think in the near term, the benefits of autonomous trucking with the hours of service exemption makes a lot of sense. But there's a lot more to it than that, too. I think there will be operational efficiencies. If you can keep this truck fully utilized more, you're recouping higher ROI because there's higher asset utilization. And that's what we're trying to do, is to give it and prepare the freight so that it's AV compatible, essentially, and make sure that when we deploy it on an AV truck, that truck is constantly moving back and forth to minimize downtime, minimize empty miles, which then again goes back to minimizing emissions too, which is a big focus for us and our customers as well on the sustainability front. So at the end of the day, I would say that, long haul is one application and the most obvious near-term application, but I think there will be many more different applications as well, apart from just faster delivery. There will be sustainability benefits, there will be safer roads benefits, lower insurance costs, better operational efficiencies, and even just more reliability and more capacity. I think all of these other value adds can make for a case for beyond long haul in the future.
And that's where we want to go, and that's what I call win-win-win. What impact, when we get to that point in the future, will autonomous trucks have on pricing? Will it allow margin expansion? Where are we going as it relates to pricing?
That's an interesting one. If I could predict prices, I would be a very wealthy woman. I think with regards to prices, it kind of all depends. It depends on what are the capabilities, of the truck. If you are going to give me an autonomous truck that needs to be down 50% of the times because 50% of the times the weather is not cooperating, then prices are not really going to work. So I think it really depends a lot on, at the end of the day, what is the truck capable of? What value does it bring to the end customer, whether that's a fleet or a shipper? And what business model will AV trucking developers, OEMs, maintenance providers, et cetera, adopt, and seeing how that all kind of pencils out with regards to TCO. And so I think a lot of that we're learning today with these early pilots, but I think prices and what the business model will look like is going to continue to evolve over the next few years.
How will the pricing differ between human-driven traditional trucks and autonomous trucks? Will there be a difference on your platform, or will it be the same price no matter what?
Yeah, I think we're still learning and trying to understand what differences will look like. Kind of going back to what we were saying before, it depends on how the autonomous trucking model shakes out. So if it's a transfer hub model, it will be very different from an end-to-end pickup to drop-off model. And the transit time, for example, is another factor, right? If one takes a lot longer and the other one is a lot faster, and we can operate it more like an expedited business, then the pricing may be different. But it all depends on, at the end of the day, what is the capability, what is the ODD, and what does the market look like for where these autonomous trucks will run.
Will any of this data be integrated into Insights AI, where you can try and find patterns in the pricing to help determine the market? Because that's, to me, one of the best things of your business. You have all that data, so you can go to your partners. Here's what the market's willing to bear. Okay, your cost is here. It doesn't make sense. And you'll kind of use that tool to help them optimize their business for the best performance.
Yeah, I think that's spot on. We are already using a lot of our data to understand what are the best applications for AVs. Also, where should we deploy them? Which lanes make the most sense? What prices make the most sense as well, et cetera. But with regards to Insights AI, it's a great way for us to interact with it and then also narrow it down specifically by shipper. So one of our consulting services today is we will go to some of our shipper customers, we'll look at their network and then run simulations on how does your network change when we incorporate autonomous trucking in. Given what we know today, like these are the lanes that autonomous trucks run on. This is where we believe they will be capable. For example, 80% of the time, the weather will be good enough or whatnot. And then with this weight limitation, this is the right kind of freight for autonomous trucks. And then we run that simulation and see, what does your network look like with autonomous trucks versus without, and versus what it looks like today? What value does it bring, et cetera? So we are already starting to do that with our consulting team and our shippers. And that's part of our education and awareness campaign of working very closely, providing white glove service to our customers to understand what it means to incorporate autonomous trucks into their supply chains, which is coming. Like I said before, we're at that inflection point. It's happening, but it's starting to get early technology adopters and leaders in to start learning.
You're enabling the autonomy economy by going in there with your white glove service and helping prepare your customers. You're enabling the autonomy economy, which is going to benefit your customers, going to benefit Uber and everybody in this industry, including you and I personally. At some point, this industry is going to scale and is going to become a very large industry. And in my opinion, it's going to play a vital part in the U.S. economy and eventually the global economy. And as autonomy scales and autonomous trucking scales, what role do you see Uber Freight playing in this scaling industry?
Oh, man. How many hours do I have to talk about this?
As long as you like.
There's so much that we are doing today and so much more that we can do as well. We're a very high growth, fast growing, fast moving company. And I think there are many different parts where we have built a business that will fit very neatly into helping accelerate the evolution of autonomous trucks coming online and providing this solution to our customers. So the first piece is kind of the demand side. Like I said, we're working very closely with our shippers to understand what applications are best for autonomous trucks. And we have about $18 billion of freight under management across our 3PL and 4PL network today. And we have a number of different types of freight that we move. For example, we have expedited, we have truckload, less than truckload, refrigerated. Cross-border is a super interesting one because that drayage piece is already built into the cross-border model, for example. High risk, high value, maybe this decreases the likelihood of fraud because you know exactly which driver is coming in and the trailers are always sealed, et cetera. So we first want to bring the demand to these assets to maximize asset utilization. And more importantly, we have a variety of freight applications that we can learn from to understand what is the best commercial application for these autonomous trucks. So there's the demand side. And then on the supply side, as I was mentioning earlier, there are about 2 million drivers on our network. And what that means is if, let's say, for any reason, the AV truck couldn't handle something, there was, let's say, a tire blowout and it's pulled over on the side of the road, or certain weather conditions it can't handle, we have a hybrid network. And that's where our 2 million drivers can step in to maintain service and make sure service isn't disrupted. Our customers' networks are not disrupted because of downtime or maintenance that's required on the autonomous truck. The 2 million drivers also provide the local hauls. So, the local runs that we were talking about, so that they get to stay home, they get that predictability in schedules. And on top of that, the autonomous trucks run the long haul, the boring stuff that no one really wants to do across thousands of miles. So I think we bring our carrier network to the table as well in this hybrid model. But more importantly, we also bring those mid-size and smaller fleets who historically would not have gotten access to autonomous trucks. We get to educate them, raise awareness. If they want to try it for 1 or 2 runs to see what an autonomous truck looks like before they make a purchase or before they incorporate this into their fleet, what does this mean for their internal team to maintain a fleet of autonomous trucks? We get to be there for them and help them with that. So I think both our supply side and our demand side will be really important in helping bring AV trucks to the market. But then most importantly is our technology. So being a tech-first platform, how do we, for example, deploy trucks? How do we build tools that make it easy to use these trucks? We don't expect fleets to build a new staff of software engineers who are going to monitor these trucks, who are going to know exactly what's happening, what it's seeing, how it's going to react, et cetera. That's going to be very expensive. So how do we build user-friendly tools that will enable shippers to have the same kind of real-time visibility, reliability, uptime, et cetera, on these trucks so that they can actually move freight on our network as opposed to having to hire some, specialist to understand what is going on. So I think the digital side of it and integrations into TMS, into different facilities, et cetera, will be really important in enabling and dispatching autonomous trucks to actually be able to deploy.
You're the partner for the future. Uber Freight is autonomous trucking's partner for the future. That's how I would describe that, what you described there, because as the industry scales, Uber Freight will scale with the industry. Olivia, as we look to wrap up this insightful conversation, we shared a lot of great insights to Uber Freight. Thank you. What would you like our listeners to take away with them today?
Yeah, I think the first thing they should take away is that The Road to Autonomy is a phenomenal podcast that I listen to a lot of. And even more importantly, I think autonomous trucking as a whole, kind of where we started, is at a very exciting time right now. And I welcome any kind of questions or engagement because it's really important right now to incorporate all those voices because this is the right time to start shaping what the go-to-market strategy is going to look like and bringing this to the industry. It's actually happening today, and I'm very excited to see it come to life. And I think Uber Freight is where we are going to lead a lot of this innovation and bring together the different players across shippers, carriers, OEMs, and even other, telematics providers, trailer providers, so that we can have a cohesive, unified front in making sure we bring a safer, more efficient, more reliable, and hopefully more sustainable mode of transportation to our customers' networks.
Autonomous trucking is the future of the supply chain. Point blank simple right there. The future is bright. The future is autonomous. The future is Uber Freight. Olivia, thank you so much for coming on the Road to Autonomy today.
Thanks for having me, Grayson. Happy holidays.
You as well. Bye-bye. If you've enjoyed listening, please kindly rate, review, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Want to get in touch? Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Road to Autonomy, or email podcast@roadtoautonomy.com. The Road to Autonomy podcast is produced by the Road to Autonomy LLC. The views and opinions expressed on the Road to Autonomy podcast do not necessarily reflect those views of the Road to Autonomy, its subsidiaries, its shareholders, directors, investors, or partners. The content discussed on this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be taken as legal, investment, tax, or business advice. Nothing is a recommendation that you purchase, sell, or hold any security or other investment, or that you pursue any investment style or strategy. The content of this podcast is presented on an as-is basis with no warranties, express or implied, of any kind. Financial mentions about companies in the Road to Autonomy Index and discussions about the Road to Autonomy Indexes are for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon when making any investment decision. Furthermore, an inclusion of security within the Road to Autonomy Index is not a recommendation by the Road to Autonomy Indices, LLC, to buy, sell, or hold that such security, nor is it considered to be investment advice.